Hi everybody, welcome to our webinar. We'll be starting in 3 more minutes. We're just waiting for the last few people to turn up and then we'll go live. So just sit tight, we'll be right with you. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of our webinar series. How do I know my organization is secure? So this will be our last webinar for 2020. We'd like to welcome all of you here. We hope all of you are well and safe and healthy, most importantly, right? So before we begin, I want to introduce our three speakers for today. So Kathleen is a solution assessment specialist at Microsoft. Wayne is a technology specialist at Vigilant Asia. He has helped organizations across different sectors such as finance, healthcare, manufacturing, and more to secure their organizations against threats. He spends most of his free time researching offensive techniques to create better defensive strategies. All right, and for our third speaker, he's the global partner manager and is based in the Netherlands. Dennis works with leading cybersecurity companies from all around the world to help them deliver valuable cybersecurity assessments using QS Solutions Cybersecurity Assessment Tool, CSAT. All right. So we hope you're ready. We hope you're here to, you're all ready to learn. And without further ado, I want to pass the time over to Kathleen.
Thank you, Joshua. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kathleen Lim, and just let me share my slide. As Joshua mentioned, I am the solution specialist for Microsoft Malaysia. I help organizations accelerate their cloud transformation journey with solution assessment. Cybersecurity assessment is one of the many solution assessments that Microsoft offer to our customers via our partner ecosystem. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that wherever you are keeping safe. We all know that the world has changed. And with the COVID, it merely accelerates a lot of the transformation that have been brewing in our industry for many years. Did you know that 94% of organizations today are using some sort of cloud solution? and 5.2 mobile business apps are accessed daily by their employees. Now, 60% of organizations currently have a formal BYOD program in place. With more than 7 billion internet connected devices in use worldwide today, you're going to see this number going to increase year on year as more devices become cheaper and more affordable, and broadband connectivity now bridge the many digital divides that we see in the past, right? So with this, it presents a lot of opportunity on how we collaborate, whether with our peers, our friends and family, right? It has changed how corporate network look today. Instead of just catering to your employees in the past, today's model, the corporate network extends beyond just the employees. We are seeing a lot of other devices connecting to the network, whether this is in the form of mobile device, IoT devices, personal devices such as your tablet, all sorts, right? And not just employees, but access are continuously growing to allow our customers, our partners, and every stakeholders that make your business successful to become part of the corporate network. With this, it introduced a lot of risk. It is both an opportunity to be able to collaborate effectively with all these stakeholders, but at the same time, it also provides a level of risk unimagined in the past. Do you know that 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing email? And 50% of the phishing attack victims fall victim a second time. And I'm one of the person who have actually been through this before, right? And do bear in mind that 95% of pushing attacks that lead to a breach, right, were followed by some form of software installation without you knowing that it actually has taken place. While technology has changed the way we do business, protecting company assets requires a new approach. And I hope that all of you agree that at some form or other, you need to have a more secure solution to protect what matters to you most, your company asset. Now, digital transformation during COVID has taken a different turn altogether. I'm sure we all agree that the year 2020 will come across as a very defining moment in all our lifetime, right? For better or for worse, it has actually accelerated digital transformation like no other innovation in the past. Knowing that there are a lot of exposure in terms of balancing what you want from technology as well as the risk that is presented, right? Microsoft 365 has really enabled a lot of our customers to really work securely from home. I have been working from home since February, right? Because of this, and as part of the changing environment, Microsoft employees worldwide can now opt to work from home permanently. And I'm sure this also applies to a lot of our customers out there. Now, with this change, right, there's going to be a lot of demand on your IT as well as your security. And that comes in the form of rolling out security controls, changes that you need to instill in your environment to manage new and personal devices, making sure that all the devices that are connecting back to your office are secured and these are authorized devices. Why? Because a lot of bad actors are really exploiting remote workers due to VPN vulnerabilities, constraints that was never done or experienced in the past. And even the remote access to apps, right, are now facing a lot of demand because of this changing environment due to COVID. So for all of you out there, right, do bear in mind that Microsoft 365 is a very quick and easy way to manage your business, and it also produces a lot of solution from a security perspective by providing you one single point of solution that meets your needs, whether this is security, collaboration, or productivity. More importantly, as you look into your security posture and your security needs, right, do have a look at the Microsoft 365. And I won't dwell too much on this other than to leave it to the partners who are going to be presenting to you the whole suite of this solution going forward. Now, Microsoft's approach to security is very unique than the rest of our competitors out there, right? Why? Because with AI and automation as the core of our products, right, this provides us a whole lot of advantage that has never been done before by any vendors in the world. Now, with this, we built in experiences that works across the platform, okay, and it integrates across people, devices, apps, and data. So this is a Microsoft unique approach. Now, before I go into the cybersecurity assessment, I wanted to actually offer this to all our attending customers today, that managing your security can be an overwhelming task, especially for a lot of our customers who do not have a full-fledged IT support team. In recognition of this, we offer cybersecurity assessments to help our customers navigate the complexity of the security solutions that are available. And I will leave this as a speaking point for my following partners in the call to walk you through what we can do from a cybersecurity assessment to help you navigate this complexity, right? So some question to bear in mind: why do you want to run a cybersecurity assessment? So question for you is, how confident are you today that your environment, that your users, your employees, or even your applications are secure? Do you know the security posture of your company today, right? The cybersecurity assessment is offered to answer this question for you. We are going to help you identify your security objectives, assess the current security state, provide a customized recommendations and best practices, as well as, more importantly, to create an actionable security roadmap for you so that you can feel that your company IP, your asset, your data are secure, and you are able to then take advantage of the digital transformation that is provided by us. With that, I want to pass it over to Wayne, who's going to walk through all the security roadmap as well as the best practices, followed by Dennis, who is going to show you the tool that we use when we run a cybersecurity assessment. Over to you, Wayne.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Wayne, and I'm the technical specialist at Vigilant Asia. My job mainly revolves around handling the offensive operations engagements conducted by Vigilant Asia, such as the penetration testing and red teaming engagements. But we also handle the risk assessments, right? As Kathleen was just talking about just now, the cybersecurity assessments. So that is also part of our scope. And essentially, before we begin, I'd just like to give you guys a brief introduction on Vigilant Asia, right? Essentially, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Efficient E-Solutions Berhad, and we're also a CREST certified company to conduct penetration testing. These are some of the industries that we protect, right? As you can see, we try to cover as much ground as possible because we believe that cybersecurity is not only limited to the financial industry nowadays. all kinds of sectors are affected. You can see in the news very recently, a lot of healthcare providers are being affected by ransomware. They are extremely vulnerable targets right now. Traditionally, the healthcare industry has not spent a lot on cybersecurity, so that is something that we are looking to change as well. And these are some of our managed services that we currently offer to our customers, right? So essentially, it's a lot of network security monitoring solutions, but we also cover other things like mobile devices as well as endpoints, right, like EDR solutions. And as mentioned, these are some of our professional services. We cover security assessments, penetration tests, vulnerability assessments, as well as provide awareness training for end users or even technical people, should you require it. But essentially, this is more of our collection of risk assessments that we can provide to our customers right now. So to begin, today's talk on understanding the threat landscape, right, the modern threat landscape, and also to give you some comparisons of how it was, right, a few years ago. First and foremost, I think it's important to understand what the intentions of these threat actors are, right? These hackers, these criminal groups, right? So obviously, they're usually financially motivated. They're driven by sabotage or even espionage, right? And depending on who is sponsoring these operations, it could fall into any of these categories, and they're not mutually exclusive either, right? It could be cybercrime plus sabotage, as is the case with ransomware you see these days. It could also be espionage, right? And as well as sabotage, where nation states would try to, either steal information or damage each other. Right, and you can see over here that most commonly, universally around the cybersecurity industry, we refer to these groups as APTs, right? Advanced Persistent Threats. One key thing to note here is that although the word advanced is in their name, it does not necessarily mean that they're extremely advanced in the sense where they use very, very advanced and complicated techniques, right? Because what we've seen is that it's the techniques that they use are basically exploiting a bunch of vulnerabilities that already exist in your environment, that are things like VPN servers, as Kath mentioned, that have vulnerabilities on them that have not been patched, right? So it's not exactly, they're not super advanced, even though they can be, right? And that's generally a misconception that people have, right? That advanced persistent threats, you only target big companies, right? Not necessarily the case nowadays, right? And you'll see what I mean sooner. So a summary of the amount of damages that ransomware attacks have caused globally, right? And you can see over here that it's close to double up, right, from 2019 to 2020, right, in terms of damages that have been caused by ransomware attacks. These includes operation costs as well, obviously, not just the ransom, so they can add up. Now, a short case study, right? And basically, this is to give an introduction on how the first APT came about, right? And essentially, this APT group is called Carbonac, right? And they were one of the first, APT groups that targeted financial institutions, right? Essentially, to for financial gain, right? And you can see that the steps here are pretty simple, right? First, you phish the blank employee, right? And you compromise the workstation with a Trojan, obviously. And then from that machine itself, you use it to explore the internal network. Okay? And once you have an understanding of the internal network, you can then monitor the behavior of the users to understand how all these different departments work with each other. And ultimately, you perform what we call the action on objectives, right? And that's usually where you execute your objective. And it's, in this specific case, what they were doing was, obviously stealing funds from the bank. And these included SWIFT transactions as well as ATM cash outs. So one of the things that, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this was because this was the first, known APT attack against banks, right? And I want you to pay close attention to the steps, right? And you would see, right, that in modern times, in 2020, the attacks remain pretty similar, right? And essentially, it is not just the banks anymore that are being targeted, right? You see different industries as well being impacted. In fact, from a threat actor's perspective, targeting a bank these days not as lucrative and not as cost effective, because banks traditionally spend way more money on cybersecurity, right? And it makes it very, very hard to, completely compromise or, execute your objective in a financial institutions environment. Whereas if you look at the healthcare, the pharmaceutical, or even, the manufacturing industries, right? Pharmaceutical here, because if you've seen in the news lately, a lot of APTs have been targeting the vaccine makers, right? And I think Johnson & Johnson also was, Johnson & Johnson CSO recently came out and made a statement regarding the amount of attacks, right, that healthcare companies are facing these days have been going through the roof, right? But anyway, as I mentioned, if we take a look at step 1 to step 4 over here, you can see that, these is still how APTs operate in 2020, except that they've extended their reach to different industries. So now instead of cashing out through SWIFT transactions and ATMs, we can see a lot of business email compromise, right? This is where I monitor your either your procurement department or your finance department. I monitor the SOP, and then I come in and try to make you change the banking account, for example. It's one of the most common things that we've seen, right? Where the threat actor monitors the communication between the vendor and the client, and they'll come in at the right time just to request that the client makes a payment to another banking account, right? In a sense, they're intercepting the funds then. The other way is also obviously ransomware, right? Monitor how the behaviors of the users are, understand what the users are doing, and understanding the data that you have, right? And you'll see why it's important these days for ransomware. So traditionally, ransomware, their main objective is to just lock up your entire environment, right? But these days, they are actually interested in gaining access to your confidential data as well, to serve as a form of leverage, right? When it comes to paying the ransom. And lastly, obviously, they can also steal your intellectual property, right? So these are some of the tactics used by ransomware groups, right? Because ransomware is like one of the hot topics these days. A lot of organizations that I've spoken to are extremely afraid of, getting hit by ransomware. And unfortunately, it's not an easy problem to solve, right? A lot of people assume that, just by paying for the right security solution or, getting the latest and greatest next generation antivirus protection, it can stop that problem, but unfortunately it can't, right? That's not how you deal with security, right? And one of the tactics you've seen ransomware groups use lately is the exfiltration of sensitive data, right? Before actually encrypting all the files within the environment. And one of the reasons is mainly to blackmail these organizations into paying with the exfiltrated data, right? So they know that a lot of organizations now will try to opt for a backup if the backup is in place. But now that they have exfiltrated data, they can then threaten these organizations to pay up, even if they restore their backup, right? Because even if they restore their backup, they can say, that they are willing to leak. They are going to leak the data that they have exfiltrated to the public if this organization, if the victim organization does not pay up. Another thing we've also seen, in the last couple of months is that ransomware groups are now cold calling victims with warnings, right? So as mentioned, when you are trying to do some form of incident response, right? Essentially, the APT or the ransomware group still has visibility into your environment, and they're able to monitor what you're doing. So in this specific case, there was a redacted transcript of a call that essentially, caught what the attackers were communicating, right? Essentially, they were warning the company that, you should not waste time trying to, get rid of the ransomware, because technically it is not possible, right? The only proper way to do it is through a backup. But nowadays, even with a backup, you still have to worry about, potential legal lawsuits, right? If you fall under GDPR regulations, if data get off, if sensitive data of your customers and such gets leaked, you have to pay quite a hefty fine, right? So nowadays, organizations are being put into very, very tough situations by ransomware groups, and we need to look at it from a different angle, right? into securing how we can secure our environment. So before we look into that, I want to sort of highlight some of the common issues, right, that lead to compromise. And based on my experience in penetration testing and offensive operations, these are some of the common things that I've seen in Malaysian organizations that I believe people should take note of, right? First and foremost, unpatched vulnerabilities. I think, as Kev mentioned earlier, right, VPN vulnerabilities have been rising lately. Every few months, you'll see a large vendor, right, disclosing a pretty severe vulnerability regarding their VPN solution. And the problem with these VPN solutions is that if they are remotely exploitable, in the sense where if an attacker can gain access and exploit the device remotely, essentially provides the attacker a gateway into your network already, right? And usually these VPN services or servers are also running with privileged accounts, privileged service accounts, right? So you can start seeing how problematic that can be, right? So when it comes to unpatched vulnerabilities, we see a lot of organizations taking a bit too long, right, to manage the vulnerability lifecycle, right? Essentially, how you do it these days is you try to implement some kind of vulnerability management program, right? But it's incredibly hard to do that if your organization also lacks visibility over the assets and networking devices in your environment, right? Do you know exactly how many servers are in your environment? Do you know the operating systems in your environment? Do you know what kind of applications require the outdated, so I understand like some organizations, they tell me that, I can't upgrade my operating system or something because I have legacy applications. That is fair, but what kind of controls do you have in place, and do you have any kinds of detection to identify any potential exploitation of those devices, right? So those are the important things. Which brings me to my next point, right? A poorly maintained and configured Active Directory. So Active Directory is a wonderful tool, right, when it comes to managing a network environment, right, an IT network environment, especially if you've got a large amount of users as well as computers, right. The problem is people often forget to sort of perform some kind of checkup, right, or spring cleaning on the Active Directory. And one of the common things that you'll see here is that you have a lot of dormant user accounts, right, accounts of users that have already left the company, but these accounts have not been disabled yet, and they remain, enabled, like, essentially, right, within your Active Directory. This essentially provides attackers the opportunity to use these accounts and fly under the radar, right? Because active users won't complain, right? Because their accounts are not being used anywhere. But dormant user accounts, when you don't have visibility over these dormant user accounts, attackers can do whatever they want, right, with these accounts, and that can be a problem. The other thing that we always see also is the excessive amount of enterprise domain administrators on Active Directory, and also leniency in terms of giving privileges to certain service accounts, right? So I've seen a large number of service accounts with domain and enterprise administrator privileges, which can be a problem, right? Because curb roasting is a attack technique that penetration testers use to essentially gain access to those service accounts. Basically, you can think of it as an offline brute force attack, right? Where if you have a weak password on these service accounts, and they typically do, because most of the service accounts I see either belong to a specific solution or a proof of concept that people forgot to remove the account from the AD, right? So you create a specific service account for the POC that you're conducting, but you forget to remove it, right? And usually these POC accounts are set up with very, very easy passwords. So if these accounts have extremely high privileges, they are vulnerable to curb roasting and can be basically access can be gained to these accounts by the attackers. Now on to the third point, right? A lot of people think that, I briefly talked about this just now, that having the best solutions in place can prevent a breach from happening, but essentially solutions are only what we call a layer of prevention, right? And prevention is ideal, but we must start looking at detection, right? Because detection is a must. Prevention relies on certain algorithms as well as signatures to be useful, which can be easily bypassed by attackers, right? It's not difficult to bypass preventive rules, but we can and are able, when we should be able to detect anomalous behavior, right? Abnormal behavior within our environments, right? For example, if you were monitoring user accounts in Active Directory and you notice a dormant user account logging in, it should always be a red flag, right? Because the user shouldn't be there anymore. And if the user that hasn't logged in 300 days suddenly logs in, that can definitely be used as some kind of detection rule, right? So this is just a general idea, right, into how you can approach security these days. Now, the last point is obviously the lenient management of privileged or local administrator accounts, right? And I think this one is common for a lot of environments. Essentially, we often see, it's related to point number 2 as well, right? The excessive amount of enterprise and domain administrators. Essentially, this extends to your cloud applications as well, right? So, for example, if you're in Office 365, we've seen organizations with, an unusually large amount of global administrators, which should not be necessary, right? And there needs to be some kind of process or control, right, in place to manage the access to these privileged accounts. Because once an attacker gains access to something like a global administrator account or domain administrator account, it's pretty much game over, right? He's allowed to do whatever he wants. So we should always be looking at protecting these accounts, right? And limiting access to the principle of least privilege. So this is my last slide, and before I hand it over to Dennis, right? But essentially, I want to give you guys an idea on how you can start identifying these issues within your environment these days, right? What I've listed so far has been just the things that I've seen, right, over my engagements, but there are plenty of other vulnerabilities and misconfigurations out there that you may not know of yet. And essentially, the point of these vulnerabilities is, the point of these assessments, right, these different assessments is to help you identify these underlying issues, right? So starting on the left, right, we have the cybersecurity assessment tool, right? And essentially CSAT, I'll just give a high breakdown because Dennis will go into much more detail later, right? But essentially the CSAT tool, right, is able to help you identify your gaps, right? And all these issues, misconfigurations, as well as policies within your infrastructure, and including your assets as well, right? So it does it really well, and it's very effective at identifying these ID gaps in a very short period of time. And on top of that, you also receive a curated technical report, right, with an executive summary for management. And this essentially entails, the findings and the things you can do to sort of overcome this, right? Which brings me to my next point, right? Suggested remediations. So CSAT also provides you remediations on these findings, so you don't actually have to go and dig and figure out the solutions yourself. All these things typically already have a bunch of best practices in line, right, to help you fix these problems. If there is a specific edge case, obviously we are also available, and you can discuss with us, and we will be able to come up with and brainstorm and find an appropriate solution, right, to a specific problem, right. Lastly, the CSAT is also really good at building out roadmaps for you. So oftentimes, right, security is a huge topic, right, and there's a lot of domains that you need to cover. So sometimes it's very hard to understand where you need to start. But the CSAT report is able to sort of help you prioritize, right, these findings, and essentially it helps you build out a roadmap, right? So in case you don't know what you want to do yet for 2021, right, you have no idea on essentially what kind of projects you want to run for security, we highly recommend you conduct a CSAT first, right? It's a good starting point. It's good to give, it's a great assessment to give you a real idea of how you are set up, right, in terms of your posture and your risk. And from there, you can get a curated list of priorities that you can focus on and essentially build out that roadmap for you. Now, for the other three, I'm going to go through it very quickly, right? But essentially, we also provide vulnerability assessments. So vulnerability assessments are essentially an assessment where we scan your environment for known vulnerabilities, right? So vulnerabilities typically are, what we mean by vulnerabilities are essentially bugs or exploits that have been disclosed by the vendors and have already a patch, right? And usually have a patch released for it already. So like I said, sometimes if you don't have a vulnerability management program in place, what you can do is you can engage us on an annual basis or, by or every 6 months, right? And we can come in and do a vulnerability scan for you and basically tell you what you need to update, right, in your environment and what kind of vulnerabilities exist within your environment. So you can see up there, there's the kill chain. I forgot to mention that, but that's the cyber kill chain by Lockheed and Martin. And it covers the whole roadmap of an attacker. And a vulnerability assessment helps you reduce risk of weaponization, delivery, and exploitation in the kill chain, right? Moving on, we have the penetration test, right? And this is usually done in limited scope and usually on critical assets, right? So a vulnerability scan is extremely wide, right? We try to scan as much as possible within your environment, whereas a penetration test is more manual, right? It's basically where people like me come in and basically start poking at your systems, right? Trying to figure out what kind of vulnerabilities or exploits that I can find that a vulnerability scanner might miss, right? So the coverage obviously depends on the scope of work, but it's usually very, very high in depth, right? Where we go pretty deep and identify the underlying issues. Ultimately, a penetration test is also able to provide you what we call an accurate depiction, right, of the risk on your technological vulnerabilities, because we actually come up with a proof of concept for these vulnerabilities that we find. We don't just hand you a report and tell you that you have a bunch of outdated software. We will actually show you how we exploit this software, right, so that it's actually reproducible on your end, and you can then make a better informed decision on whether or not this is something that you should prioritize, right? And lastly, what we call the intelligence-led penetration test, or red teaming. This is something that we've started offering. Essentially, it's right now RMIT, the Bank Negara risk management. I forget what's the full name of it, but essentially it's the regulation, right, the Bank Negara has in place to sort of ensure that financial institutions have set up their IT environment to a certain standard, right? And one of the requirements there is what we call intelligence-led penetration test. And what's different from a normal penetration test is that in an intelligence-led penetration test, what we usually do is we try to emulate adversaries, right, by using the exact kill chain that you see on the top from start to end, right? This means that we will perform an external reconnaissance of your organization. We'll look for your servers, your external assets, your mail servers, and stuff like that. And we will look for ways, right, to achieve objectives, right, that's typically defined by your organization, right? This is where your organization tells us, okay, I want to see if an attacker can actually exfiltrate data out of my, SQL server, for example. And this is where we can try to do that. Right, so the scope is not very defined in a sense, where there are rules of engagement, but essentially it's more defined by the objectives, right? And these objectives typically have an associated impact, right, to the organization. Another thing that people do use this for is also to obviously train the incident response team, right? So if you have an incident response team, or what we call a blue team, right, a security team, you can basically see if they're able to detect these kind of attacks, and essentially they're also able to, think of it as a dry run, right? A drill, right? Where they're able to experience how an actual attack simulation would look like. And lastly, the reason why red teaming or intelligence-led penetration testing is extremely valuable is because it actually measures your entire organization risk as a whole, right? We're not just looking at your technology, we're also looking at the people, we're looking at your internal processes, and we're also looking at your technology. And APTs abuse these three things, right? They're not just looking at exploiting your technology, they're looking at exploiting people as well. And that's why you see phishing is a huge thing, and it's a huge problem these days, right? They're also exploiting your processes, where they try to get your procurement department to make payment to a separate bank account, right? And typically, these things happen because of a lack of processes in place to validate these kind of requests, So, a red team can basically help you perform all these kind of assessments and give you a very, very realistic overview of, how your organization is set up against APTs, right, of this day and age. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, I would like to hand it over now to Dennis, right? And Dennis will be talking more on CSAT, as you can see on the slide over here, the first portion of it. He will basically go through what CSAT is and what kind of data CSAT can provide and the value it can provide to your organization as well. So Dennis, hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Wayne. And, just validating, can everyone see the screen? I hope you can. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the call and the webinar. In the next couple of minutes and that's next 20-25 minutes, I will talk you through the cybersecurity assessment tool. My name is Dennis Dols, partner manager with QS Solutions, and just before we get started on the topic itself, a brief introduction on QS Solutions. QS Solutions is a global independent software vendor. We are developing security and governance software on top of the Microsoft platforms and are working with partners all around the world to resell those software solutions. With Vigilant Asia, of course, one of our top partners in the Asia Pacific region. And today's call and today's topic will be about the cybersecurity assessment tool. You see that on the left-hand side of this slide. And we'll go through a couple of topics. Of course, Wayne and Kathleen have discussed with you the current situation on security and how COVID-19 not just impacted our daily lives, but also the way we do business and the way we work and our employees are working together. So why is it important to do these type of cybersecurity assessments? And then we go into the tool, the CSAT, and talk about how CSAT can be of help in establishing a baseline and make sure that you proactively start improving your cybersecurity in the near future. So those different topics we'll discuss. And maybe before we get started, it's good to ask ourselves one question. And this question is, why don't we already have the level of security that we need? There were so many recommendations in the slides of Wayne and Kathleen, all of them very important, but the question is, why didn't we arrange it in the past already? And maybe the most important reason for not having the right security in place is probably security is not a business priority. And many of you will be part of IT departments or security departments, and this might be very relevant to you because if you talk with your colleagues in business management and line of business managers, sometimes and in many cases it's really difficult to convince them of an investment in cybersecurity. In any of those topics and remediations that Wayne showed you in the last 15 minutes. And this is actually something that we need to overcome together to make sure that we land the budget, the right resources, the right skill set to make sure that we improve cybersecurity in the near future together. And this is also the focus for the development of CSAT. So if we look at the reason why QS Solutions has developed CSAT, it's simply because many organizations these days are aware of the fact that they need to improve security. There's a lot of awareness also because of the COVID-19 situation and everybody working from home. So business managers, even if they don't have a technical background at all, everybody understands nowadays that they need to have a certain level of security in place. But in the end, if we look at the proactiveness and the effectiveness of that awareness, it gets stuck by defining the next actions. And one of the main reasons, if you ask us, is simply because there is a lack of visibility on the current cybersecurity position of the organization. Business managers do not have insights into the holistic view on their current cybersecurity posture. And if we can help them give those insights, and if you can also gain insights into those typical misconfigurations that Wayne just showed you, but also into organizational policies and procedures in the organization, you can identify the gaps And based on your gaps, instead of a general market research, you really take the perspective of your organization and make decisions on which improvements are important to you and what budget you need, what resources you need to improve those gaps and to basically improve the different gaps till a certain standard. So you really make decisions based on facts from your own IT environment. And this cybersecurity assessment tool has been used by many partners. As Kathleen mentioned, it's the preferred tool for cybersecurity assessments with Microsoft. And clients of different segments and industries have used this. Financial industry, healthcare industry, but also manufacturers or professional services organizations have used this tool to identify those gaps and to make sure that they create an action plan which is based on facts from their IT environment. And if I'm talking about an IT environment, it's safe to say that many of you guys will currently work in a hybrid IT infrastructure, where you probably have a couple of servers on premises or in your data center. You have a local Active Directory. There is workstations that people are working with, and more cloud applications are being used by the organization. Some of them with authorization from IT, some others might be shadow IT, and business managers have chosen those applications. They pay it by credit card, and IT might not be aware of the usage of those tools. Quite a complex environment to manage and to secure all of these different elements, especially as it is changing every day. And the reason it's changing every day is simply because your employees and users in general are making use of all of those different assets. There will be administrators performing management tasks inside all the different services. But there will also be employees currently working from home, searching remote access to different applications and data, sharing information with each other, but also inviting third parties to gain access to certain storage locations. For example, in Office 365, where we have great sharing capabilities, but this also poses a security threat. So a lot of things going on, and in the end, to effectively improve your cybersecurity, what the CSAT does is go into that hybrid IT infrastructure, collect relevant security data, and use that data to provide you with recommendations to improve your cybersecurity position effectively, based on the real risk in your organization. So you see a couple of examples here. For example, a high number of external users with access to Office 365 storage locations. Well, think of procedures, organizational procedures or tooling that can help you effectively automate this process and establish a process for this. Or if we look at a high number of administrators account without two-factor authentication, a serious risk for every organization these days. And of course, depending on your organization and the business you're in, any one of these should be the top priority. But at least you can make a decision of what is the highest risk for your organization and how do we want to mitigate the risk. Not just in a discussion with the IT department, but in a discussion with both business managers and IT and security personnel to make sure that you make the right recommendations, you find the right budget, and that you make a good plan moving forward. Then briefly on the CSAT solution. So what can we connect to, and what sources do we support? Well, first of all, important to know that we have a very comprehensive scan on everything with a Windows operating system. We really go in depth on the Windows operating system, detect misconfigurations in the registry, look at installed applications, the firewall rules, many different topics on the Windows operating systems to detect the configurations or misconfigurations on the Windows operating system. Of course, furthermore, Office 365 and basically the Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Cloud Platform as a whole is of course an important source when it comes to security too, where Microsoft provides many different security solutions, but it is also the case where that these solutions have to be configured properly to be effective. So we look at the configuration of SharePoint settings, Teams settings, Microsoft Intune, Azure AD, and the Azure tenant with maybe some virtual machines that you have running in Azure. And of course, an important last source is the local Active Directory, and to look at the configurations, the dormant user accounts that Wayne talked about, administrative accounts, the password policy set to local AD, etc. All of that relevant security data is pulled inside CSAT, so you have a single pane of glass on your security situation. And based on that technical data, you can probably draw many good conclusions when it comes to security. But in the end, security is also about organizational policies and procedures. And therefore, there is also a questionnaire inside CSAT to discuss these policies and procedures in your organization, to gain insights into for example, the on and offboarding of user accounts or around security awareness training for employees. So many of these topics will be discussed in the questionnaire. So you really take that holistic approach on security and identify the gaps of your organization. Then regarding the data collection, it's important to know that CSAT is not a cloud solution. CSAT is really an installation which you do inside your IT infrastructure. And this means that all of the data collected by the CSAT is only used in your IT infrastructure. It's not uploaded into a cloud. You fully control what data is where, and you can do the analysis on one of your machines. So what you do is you prepare a machine for the CSAT to be installed on, and from the CSAT installation, there is a web interface to connect to those different sources. In the end, the CSAT will generate a report where the team of Vigilant Asia will work on to finalize it, of course, in a discussion with you guys to make a priority list based on the reporting capabilities and vulnerabilities of your organization. And in a very short period of time, your Vigilant Asia can help you identify those gaps when it comes to cybersecurity. What I will do next is briefly show you the interface of CSAT, so at least you have an impression. If you're interested to know more, you can reach out to the Vigilant Asia team to schedule a product demonstration or to have an in-depth chat on these cybersecurity assessments. So I will change the screen to a browser where you will see the CSAT interface. I won't go through everything. I will just show you how easy it is to set up the services, what type of data you can expect, and what a typical report outcome will look like. First off, let's start with the first component here, services. Basically, where services and endpoints is where you configure the scope of the assessment. So under services on the left-hand side, in the menu here, you find the different services that the CSAT can connect to. For example, local Active Directory, a main source when it comes to security. And it's pretty straightforward. You provide your Active Directory domain name along with a user account for the local AD, and the CSAT can use that information to effectively scan the local Active Directory for computer accounts, user accounts, administrative accounts, password policy, and many other data sources from the local AD. All of that data will come back in the analysis screens. So under analysis on the left-hand side, you see three main topics. On-premises endpoints, everything with a Windows operating system. We have a very comprehensive scan for Linux devices and network devices. We scan those using SNMP and SSH. So you will find them here. But on those Windows devices, you can quickly see what type of operating systems do we have. Is antivirus installed on those machines, and is it turned on, or did we switch it off on one of those machines? And also looking at the SMP version 1, whether this is disabled. So this is just a quick overview on those devices. If you click a device, you can really drill into those devices, find the applications installed, the firewall rules, shares being used, or the accounts which are logging in on this specific machine, for example. On the left-hand side, you will find far more data on an aggregated view, so you can see what applications were installed in the environment, what software is being used. You can look at the patches or the secure configuration of the Windows devices. And on Active Directory, with the accounts, many of the factors that Wayne discussed earlier, which are typically the points of exploring your environment by the hackers, is of course a last logon date to find the dormant accounts and to talk about the on and offboarding procedure of accounts, but also the bad password attempts. So some interesting information in these screens. And on the Microsoft Cloud side, if we look at Office 365, a very interesting one is also to see whether you have configured all of the accounts with multi-factor authentication in Office 365, for example. So it really pulls together both your on-premises infrastructure as well as the cloud components with Office 365, for example, here, or with SharePoint and Teams, looking at what resources are shared with third parties. That's presented in this overview. So it pulls together all that information to create a baseline based on this technical data, but also based on a questionnaire where you will discuss around 20 different topics. And this is the Center for Internet Security 20 controls. So an internationally recognized framework to do cybersecurity assessments with. And within this framework, you will go through different questions on organizational policies and procedures you have defined around these different controls. In the end, all of the technical data, as well as the answers to a questionnaire, will deliver summary screens, for example, on the endpoints, so what operating systems are out there, how many servers do not have Windows Defender or do not have any antivirus, or how many machines have SMB version 1 enabled. A lot of summary screens, of course, depending on your organization's IT infrastructure. And it will also give you this overview where you will find the different scores and your maturity level on the different security controls. And this is really useful to identify those gaps. In the end, if we talk about security, you are as strong as your weakest point. And with this overview, you can quickly identify the gaps where you need to start improving. And what we often find with IT departments is that they have a couple of guys in their IT departments which are really good in, for example, firewall. So they overperform and outperform everyone on the firewall layer. But as soon as we go to identity, for example, a very important topic when it comes to security, there might not be good management and good automation around the identities in Active Directory and the privileged accounts, for example. So by using this assessment, you can quickly identify those gaps and make sure that you can effectively discuss your cybersecurity position together with business management to make informed decisions on the new security initiatives in the near future. So just a quick glance on the CSAT. By the way, if you run this as a recurring service, so if you, for example, use this to do quarterly assessments, you can compare the previous assessment result with the current one and present to business managers that you have effectively used the limited security budget that you have to remediate and to remove certain risks of the organization. So you can also report back on improvements using the CSAT solution and identify new gaps as IT environments are constantly changing. So a quick glance of the CSAT. In the end, what you will get from the Vigilant Asia team is a report, of course, containing a management summary. And in this management summary, you will find the overall scoring, you will find an action plan, including urgent action items. And these urgent action items are mostly IT projects. They involve a bit more budget and resources. But next to these urgent action items, there is always a list of quick wins. And these quick wins are defined by a minimum budget, but great steps forward in terms of security. And you can think of remediations like review the administrators in local Active Directory, separate your Wi-Fi for guests, or make sure that multi-factor authentication is configured for your cloud administrators in Office 365. All easy recommendations and easy remediations, but very effectively if we talk about the security position. Of course, there's a lot more detail in this document. So you saw those different graphics on the maturity scoring already. But of course, technical data is also used as input to provide your organization with advices based on the technical data from the CSAT assessment tool. To summarize, the value for you for these cybersecurity assessments is mainly to make a baseline, create a baseline, gain insights into your current cybersecurity position, and start creating an action plan based on facts from your IT organization. Make sure that you discuss these recommendations, not just with IT and security, but make sure that business management understands that they need to take responsibility on the security topic. In the end, you have to facilitate the business managers to work productively and to outperform every competitor in the market. But the only way they can do it is by also having a secure environment. So the CSAT really gives you the input and also the graphics, which are understandable for business management without a technical background, and prove that you take security seriously. Make sure to do these assessments every quarter. Track the progress, and also important, if you have to comply to law and regulations such as GDPR, well, if you can show that you know your current security status and that you have a comprehensive plan moving forward, maybe, and we cannot prevent that 100%, but if you get into a situation where you get into a lawsuit, at least you have a good story. You make sure that you can present the current security situation and that you have a plan. And well, it might went wrong, but you did everything in your power to effectively increase the security layer of your organization. So those are the different value points. Of course, there's a lot of other values here too, but these are the most important ones in my opinion. And that is the brief presentation on the cybersecurity assessment tool. With that, I would like to hand it back over to the guys of Vigilant Asia, and I would like to thank everyone who listened in for your time. Have a wonderful day ahead and stay safe.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you so much. My thanks to Kathleen and Wayne as well for presenting. I would like to leave the next 2 minutes open for question and answer. Otherwise, I will consider this session as finished and I will close it. For all attendees, I will be providing a post-webinar resource, which means the slides that you've seen here today, as well as the recording, within 1 to 2 working days will be in your inbox, and you'll be able to have access to it and you can share it around. Yeah, so I'd just like to leave this time here for the next 2 minutes for any questions that you might have. Otherwise, thank you so much. We thank you for your attendance and we hope that you stay safe and healthy. If you have any questions, please put them in the live Q&A portion of the box that you see on your right, and one of our speakers or moderators will answer your questions.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to jump in and say that if your organization is interested in a CSAT assessment that is funded by Microsoft, feel free to reach out to us, and we can arrange for qualification with Microsoft, right? So if your company is qualified, you'll be able to get a fully sponsored CSAT assessment performed by us using QS Solutions CSAT tool. So yeah, just drop us an email and we'll get back to you.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much for attending. I see there are no questions left. Again, this is our last one for the year. We'll see you next year in January, where we have another webinar episode. Thank you so much. Again, if you want to do a CSAT assessment and you want to see if you are qualified, please email us at info@vigilantasia.com.my and we'll get back to you right away. Thank you.